Okay, hello guys. Welcome to the part 2 of the neck and head setup or modules. So in the first part, I didn't really have a slide for you guys because I don't think we really needed it. What we were doing was just making basic FK controls and talking a little bit about joint placement. So that's already like sorted. However, in this part 2, I want to go over the upgrades that we're going to do. So what we're going to do first is the IK neck upgrade, where we're going to just do exactly as we did with the spine, but in this case we're going to parent it underneath a hierarchy of FK controllers. And once that's done, we set up we put the controllers into the hierarchy and we set up our advanced twist. And then if you want to continue, you can do the squash and stretch as shown, exactly as shown in the spine. After that's done, you can do, we're going to do the eye aim setup, which will be setting up an aim to either follow our eyes are following the rotation, or they follow our head aim, or we're gonna make the eyes follow a fixed point in our rig that we can actually move around. So once our rig or character is moving, we can just make the eyes aim for that position. And that's it. And then at the end, we're gonna do a cleanup of the module just to make sure that everything is nice and tidy. But as you know, we're gonna clean everything up in a separate video where we put all the modules together. So for now, just parent them into one hierarchy that's gonna be called accordingly to the videos. But yeah, that's it for the neck and head. So let's get to it. All right, let's continue with the next part of this series. So, or the next part of this head and neck setup. So, what we did last round, is, as I mentioned before, was just the basic FK setup. And now I'm just gonna start out by duplicating my neck chain, and I'm gonna kill everything that's called head and below the head. So we're left with only the duplicated neck joint. I'm gonna kill the first. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna rename these first. So I'm gonna select that one and say modify, search and replace. We're gonna search for _JNT. We're gonna _IK JNT because we're gonna convert this duplicated chain into an IK chain, just as we did for the spine. Next thing I'm gonna do is just quickly go in and selecting all of them. I'm gonna go into the radius under the channel control. We've done all this, so that's why I'm going a little bit faster, because I'm expecting you guys to kind of understand it by now. So I'm selecting all my conjoints, going into the radius, scaling them up a little bit. Then I'm going to duplicate the whole chain again, select the last one, unparent that here, and delete the two middle ones. If I can figure out my keyboard here. So there we go. And then the next thing I'll do is I'll figure out what I call this. I call that spine, because we need like the same joints as we had before for the spine of the neck, or the spline of the spine. We need driver joints to the curve that's going to be in our neck. It has to be driven by some joints. So let's go in here, and this is the first one, so I'm just going to call that, instead of spine, I'm going to call that neck. And I'm going to just going to duplicate that name, and then I'm going to call this the A, because I can see where my position of my pivot is. It's the first part. I'm going to select the next one. It's going to be the B, and I'm just going to select both of them and make them a little bit bigger. So now we basically have two driver joints. So I'm going to select my IK chain. Basically, I'm going to isolate it, and then I'm going to go into skeleton. I'm going to go and take the IK spline, and I'm going to click the first one, the second one, and as you can see, we get the same as we did with the spine. So let's call this M neck IK spine, and let's just duplicate that name, use it for the curve as well, and call that CRV, and get everything back. So the way I'm hiding and unhiding here is by pressing Alt H and then Control Shift H to get it back again. So the Alt H is the way that I unhide everything but my selection, instead of hiding my selection. So right now I'm just going to select the driver joints and the neck neck curve that we got on creating our IK spline. Select those two and then start skinning that and make sure that when you're in the skinning control, you just take selected joints. That should be fine. If you just reset your tool and make sure that it's in selected joints. Okay, so now that's here, and that's great. So the next thing we need to do is get some controllers, and we're just gonna do like we did before. We're gonna duplicate some controllers around, so I'm just gonna select my spine controllers and duplicate them, unparent them from that hierarchy, and I'm just gonna move them forward here, so I have them outside of that hierarchy. And then we can keep these for now, because we actually need up vectors for our neck as well. So okay, hang on, I'm getting some messages here. I'm gonna kill that. Let's see here. Just gonna kill that one, and then I'm just gonna take these two and say modify and search and replace name, and we're gonna look for the spine. We're gonna replace that with neck. There we go. Delete that here, so delete that one, so we can't see the duplicates anymore. So I'm going to select the A. I'm going to parent that underneath my, because in this case we have a tilted chain. Before we had a completely straight chain, so we need to make sure that our controllers are first of all in the same rotation, but also that the up vectors will be exactly 90 degrees. So when the joint chain is trying to find an aim to figure out like which way is up, we need to parent it underneath. We need to have that in the 90-degree angle. So the first thing I'm going to do is just parent my controllers underneath here, and I want to have them in the same orientation as the rest of the hierarchy. So you can see I'm not taking the Y, because we're having a different rotation on our joints than we are on our controllers. So I'm just, once I reset those to 0, I'm just going to unparent it again. And you can see if I select my controller here and I select my controller here, the rotations are still the same. So X to the X rotation forward, same thing here. Y rotation to the sides, Z rotation to barrel roll. And I'm going to do the same thing for my second controller out here. I'm going to parent that into the front here, and take all these, 0 them out, unparent that orient group again. And now what I'll do is just quickly shape my controllers here. As I mentioned earlier, I'm gonna make a lecture on just how to create controllers, because what we're doing right now is that we're still doing the blocking of what we want it to look like. So the way that our controllers are looking right now is not what they'll be looking in our final rig, because we got to give our animators something that's intuitive, and this is a little bit too cluttered. However, just to get something down moving forward. So right now we have our IK here. It's still not doing anything. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take my controller, IK controller, my neck IK controller, and parent constrain my joint, my IK joint driver to it. So I'm selecting the controller and then the joint, and I'm going to parent constrain. I'm going to make sure that I have a maintain offset on, because we have that 90-degree angle rotation. And you can see how my controller is now controlling the bottom of that neck. I'm going to take the front of the neck and select. Okay, so I can see I actually parented this one wrong. So let's just go back and quickly take the orient group of this controller and put it underneath the head here. Move that forward, and then unparent it again. And then select the controller, select the joint, constrain it, parent constrain it. And when I move my controller now, you can see the chain is actually trying to follow. So the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to select the head controller, which is here, and that has an orient control here, and we're going to parent that underneath our IK controller. So now when I'm moving my IK controller, you can see my neck is actually following, which is great. So right now all we need to do is get our IK controllers into our FK hierarchy. So if I take this IK controller and parent that underneath my starting neck here, so when I move my neck around, you can see the IK controller is following along. And I'm going to take this IK controller and parent that underneath the end spine neck. So when I move this, when I'm still moving my FK chain around, like so. You can see I get that rotation here, and my IK is obviously following, so I can move. So I can move this one. It's gonna move the whole neck. And the last thing we want to do is make sure that our advanced spine twist is set up as well. So I'm just gonna drag over here and get that IK spline here, go into the IK spline. Before I do that, I want to select this up neck. I'm gonna duplicate the name of it, select that IK spline handle again, go into the attribute editor, enable twist controls, and then change this world object type to object start up and end. And the start should be A, and the object 2 should be B. So you can see now if I take this one, rotate. Oh, let's make sure. Sorry. There you go. So you can see it rotates now. So that's the neck, and this is where I'm saying to you guys, you know how to make out of this curve that you got created from making the spline. You know from the spine video, if you've done that one, or else go back and do that again, how you can set up a multiply and divide node to make this stretch. So if you want to make your spine, your neck stretch, I'm gonna do that, but I'm not gonna show you the same thing twice. So on these controllers as well, so we can kill these stretch factors. But since we're gonna set up the stretch in a moment on my own, I'm gonna leave it here. Anyways, that's it for the neck. So I'm gonna hit save now, and then the next thing I'll do is I will go in and I'll make my eye aim. So as you can see here, I already have a controller here. I'm actually gonna kill that one because I actually did record the whole thing first, and then I'm doing it again. That was a mistake. I didn't hit record. So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna show you exactly what I did. So if I go in under the head, I have these two eye controllers here, and if I hit focus on that in the outliner, I'm gonna take these two orient groups of the eyes and unparent them. And because our eyes are completely pointing forward without any rotations, I can just drag these two out, and I'm gonna place them. I'm just gonna go by eye, so there's no rules to how far out you can go. The next thing I'm gonna do is take these two, and first thing I'm gonna do is create a circle, just to have something that they can be parented underneath. So if I take this one, I'm gonna take the circle, I'm gonna duplicate it again, and on a duplicate I'm gonna delete the shape node of that, so you can see I have shapes added on. And then I'm gonna parent this circle underneath well, my controller underneath my orient group. And then I'm gonna select my controller here, and I'm gonna go to the controller. I'm gonna display the pivot point. I'm gonna select the orient group that I created for the circle. And you can see here, if I hold down V while middle mouse snapping on this circle is gonna come up here. And if I hit F8, I can now increase the size. I don't want to shape it yet because it's still oriented to the controller here, and that's not what I want. I want to zero out this X value so it jumps into the middle. I still want my rotation and translation to be the same, so the position of the transform node is great now, but we still want to change that shape. So I'm just going to rotate that around and make something, I mean, obviously we're not going to make something pretty now, but we want to make something somewhat that'll just work for our own visual sake. But when we give it to our animators, we're going to make some new controllers. But it shouldn't be our first priority as we're building the rig. So right now I'm gonna call this M aim I. Let's call it I aim control orient group, and I'm gonna call this one here for I aim control. Should be good enough. And then we're gonna parent these two underneath that controller. We're gonna not see shapes for now. So the last thing we're gonna do is just quickly give these two guys a new name. So if I say modify, search and replace name, let's go for so we're gonna call that I. Let's search for I, and let's replace that with I aim. Let's do that for the whole hierarchy, and then delete these ones since they have unique names now. So now when I move this one around, what our objective will be is that this eye will make this eye aim for it, and this eye will make this eye aim for this controller. And the overall objective is to just move this one around. We'll make our monster look for it. And then if we want, we should be able to switch between having the eyes following the head controller or having the eyes following this controller. So they will always be in the same point position, but they will have a different orient. So that's what we're gonna do now. So let's create a locator, and let's call this one for I local aim block. I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to drag both of them out here. So once again, hold down V, select both items, hold down V. Make sure you have a square here. If you don't have a square, if you have a circle, you might want to check these ones up here, or you want to click on that actual square in here, circle in there, and it's going to turn into a square. And if it's a square, you can snap it. So when you hold down V, you can see like it's blue now, so it wouldn't work. If you click on it now, it turns yellow. So if you hold down there and hold down V, then you can start snapping like so. So here I just duplicated that one, and I'm gonna snap that one over to this controller. So I'm gonna say that one should go there. I'm just gonna scale them up a little bit. Obviously not in the controller's transform scale, but in the shape scale. So this one we're gonna rename to be R instead. And I'm going to duplicate these two again, and this time I'm going to take them and I'm going to drag them back to the eyes. So we can't really snap to the eyes here because that's a little bit hard to do. So I'm just going to have these two selected, and I'm going to select the joints here of the eyes. I'm going to hit isolate. So I'm going to take the right eye and the left eye and snap them onto here, so they're exactly in the middle of the eye. And then we're going to just take these two and drag them upwards, because they're going to serve as our up vectors. So if I hit, let's not call that aim, let's call that up back, and let's call this one R up back. And sorry, let's go unisolate that. So right now we created basically all we need to make our aim. So I'm just gonna hit save. Okay, so as with all constraints, we're gonna hit the two things that we want to constrain to first, or we want to constrain with, or to actually, and then we're gonna select the object that we want to constrain. So in this case, I want to select my the thing that's gonna be my local and my controller. So these two, they're exactly in the same position right now, but at some point we're gonna parent this locator underneath the head. So when the head is rotating, this locator will rotate with it, but this one will stay in the same position. And like so, we can switch between the two. So, well, don't worry, we're gonna do all of that if it seems a little bit cloudy. So I'm gonna start out by selecting the locator and the controller. The order doesn't matter, but you have to take notice of it later. So in this case, I'm gonna start with the locator. I'll make sure I only have the locator selected, and I'm gonna select the next object here, which is the controller. And then I'm gonna select the eye close controller. And we're gonna select the modify group of that controller, so the group right on top of it. So this one. And then we go into constrain, and under constrain we go for aim. And what's important now is that we can see these up vector names, because the first thing we're going to do is we're going to maintain the offset, and I'm going to walk you through some of these options. So we have an up vector, well, our forward vector, which is our aim vector. What are we aiming with? We're aiming with the Z axis. The up vector, we're going to use an object up, so technically that doesn't matter, so just keep it standard here. So we want to make sure that we can see that the positive value of Z is our aim, because we're aiming at these two guys out here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set an object up. So if you haven't already got that, set this one to object up, and then we're going to go in and we're going to say that this should be called our LI local up vec block, and then I'm gonna hit apply, and you can see that my modify group here got an aim constraint drop down on it here, and it's occupying my rotation channel now. And you can see down here, if I select this one, or you can see the actual group is being affected by the constraint that are lying here, it's the same as this one. You can see that we have the local aim here, and we have the controller here. And now, before I go on, I'm just going to do both of them at the same time. So I'm going to select the locator here, I'm going to select the controller, and I'm going to select the close controller, the one I want to manipulate. I'm going to take that modify group, and then in this case I'm going to replace the L with an R, and then we're going to hit the aim on, and you can see we have again the local and the local and the regular controller. So if I rotate it right now, it's going to be following 50% of each. So if I take this one out here, you can see it's not following 100%. It's still is biased. It doesn't really know if it's actually aiming in between. And we want it to follow. Well, when we have we're going to create an on-off control, or a floating value control that's going to be switching between the two. So right now we can see that it's influenced 100% by both, and we want to create a mix. So the first thing you can see here is that I have an I aim. I'm just going to delete that because we're going to remake it now. So I'm going to call that I aim local or world, and I'm going to say the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 1. I'm going to add that. Then I'm going to go into my node editor right there, and on my transform node, so you can see the shape node is the one with the icon, my transform node is the one here, and that's the one that I've added my attribute to. So what we want to do now is that we want to introduce a new node, and it's called the reverse node. So if I tap in here and say reverse will take a 0 and make it into a 1, and if it gets a 1, it'll make it into a 0. So if I go here now and I take in my aim constraints on my eyes here, if I pick those two up and add them with a little plus here, you can see I have these two. This is the R, this is the L. I have the two ones coming in. And when I say that this one is set to 1, I want it to follow the world, which is this controller right here. So if I now select this one and drag and drop it into from my controller into my aim constraints. So I'm just going to take those two aim constraints and put them both in here. Let's say that when I have if I go in here, you can see like this is my new custom made attribute, like it's right here and it's right here. So if I drop that in, I say like when this is in 1, I want my controller to be what's driving the eyes, and when this one is set to 0, I want that to be what's driving my eyes. So if I want to reverse this value, I can't take a multiply and divide now and just multiply by -1 or whatever. I have to literally reverse that value. So when this one is when we set this one in 0, that value will become 1 at the other end. So you can see as this one is set to 0 now, the input here is set to 0 because it's a direct connection. There's nothing in between. There's nothing that changes that value. However, if I take this value, the aim, my custom attribute, and drop it into the reverse input, you can see the input here is set to 1, but what comes out of it is interesting. So if you say output X into these two, you can see it's actually taking a value of 0 and reversing that value to become a 1 instead. And that's interesting because what we're going to do now is that we're going to take these two eye aims that we have in exactly the same position as our eyes. We're going to parent them underneath our head, and we're going to, you can see here, if I start doing this now, my eye is set to 0, which means that I've decided that that's local to the head. Which means that if I rotate the head now, the eyes are following these two objects. So no matter where the head is, that's where the eyes are looking. However, we've set it up so our eyes are following these two guys as soon as this one becomes into 1, turning into world. So you'll see what happens now if I dial up and down. So I'm going to dial that up to 1. You can see my eyes are starting to aim for this one now, which means that I can like make an animation that switches between the two over a couple of frames, so the sort of transition between will be floating. So I'm gonna set that back to 0 again. And one thing that I want you guys to notice and show you the reason why we're creating an up vector, it's actually quite clear with the eyes, because you can see as soon as you start making a barrel roll with this head, my controllers are actually not rotating with the head. They're staying flat on because they don't know right now what's up. They think that they're following the world up. Technically they're actually trying to follow these objects here. They're still aiming for these objects. So if I take this object here and now rotate it, you'll see that my eye is actually rotating. So the last thing we need to do is just make sure that our up locators are parented underneath our head. And now you'll see that when I rotate my head, my eyes will actually rotate correctly. So you can see now they're actually tilting together with the head. And that's actually it for creating like a regular local world space controller. And that will be done for a lot of things and a lot of rigs. For instance, if you want to create some character is holding something in their hand, you can create a local world position where one thing is parented to the world and the other thing is parented to a specific part of your rig. So you can make your arms follow the head, or you can make, I mean, this will all be done in the same way. And if you have more than one space, so you guys will in some points have seen a rig have a world space that will say you can choose between the hips or the head or the world, then you're doing it with set driven keys. But this is it for now, and I want you guys to take all of this stuff that we created, close it down to make sure that all these are set to plus so you don't ungroup something, and then you select all of it and then you say group, and then you're gonna call this one for the head or neck head group. And don't worry about this controller for now, because later on what we will do is we're going to create a global controller for our character, and underneath that global controller we'll parent this world aim. So when the character is moving out of that world space or world controller, he will still be looking at this aim control. Anyways, that's it for the neck and head. Please go onto my website and just sign up for the newsletter, so I'll keep you guys on the toes. We're gaining momentum now because we're definitely more than halfway with like setting up the modules, and then after that we have a cleanup stage where we're gonna upgrade to some finger joints and some claws. But all that stuff is like tweaking. The next major thing we're gonna do is the tail, and after we have the tail, we're basically good to start combining stuff and putting them into the major hierarchy. But if you made it this far, it's really, really good. So keep me updated if there's anything you need help with, and I'll try and help you guys either on the comments or give me a mail. Anyways, good luck guys.